Hey, everybody. Welcome back. Thanks for joining us on this podcast, or if you're watching us on video, thanks for making the time. We're this summer at our church, Good News Neighborhood, Palatine, Illinois. We're working on cultivating virtue as we walk in faith. And so what we've been talking about week by week is how, like Paul talks about in Galatians chapter 5, just trying not to do bad leaves me stuck in this tug of war where I end up just falling back into it. Paul says, no, you walk by the Spirit. If you walk by the Spirit, you don't satisfy the desires of the flesh. And so we're going through these virtues one by one. We've talked about love. We've talked about joy. And this midweek thing is a kind of piece to try to help us think a little deeper. And so when I was thinking about peace, and definition that has been used in my life that I really like is the calm assurance that what God is doing is best. When I was thinking about someone in my life who embodies that, who could serve us by a conversation today, I thought of my friend John Guerra. So I'm thrilled that he's here and honored that he joined us. We have been friends through a lot of seasons, and he's an amazing musician, and he's taught also in our church. But I don't know, I'm hoping maybe we can kind of dig a little deeper than the kind of public persona stuff into the personal stuff, because that's really what's more significant to you and I, obviously, in our relationship. John, I know you as a person of peace. That's how I experience you. I've known you for a lot of years, 20 plus years probably now, getting close to something like that since we went to college, almost 20. So I know you as a person of peace. I experience you that way. Is that your nature, or is that something you've learned? Or why do people who get around you experience that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. It's not my nature. If you remember 20 years ago, I was in a very fierce rock band. Yeah. And I would say the fierceness of that band and the emotional extremity and dare I say the exhibitionist emotion of that band is more my nature. I definitely feel overwhelmed regularly. I was always a very sensitive kid, and the way I've put it now is just always felt like there was a few, at least from my perception as a kid, always felt like there was a few extra frames per second, feelings-wise, between me and the other kids, and maybe most, artistically inclined, musically inclined children are this way, teenagers, but especially when those teen years hit, boy, it was just like it was an explosion of feeling for sure. And so peace was something that felt very fleeting growing up, and music was something that I felt peace in. I remember Tim Keller is top of mind because we're kind of living in the wake of his death, but I remember listening to sermons by him and feeling a sense of peace from his sermons. I remember these moments of peace, these like fleeting moments of, I remember being in college and finding peace in study. It was like the first time I'd really studied the scriptures and not just read it as like, oh, that's kind of cool, but really was like studying and what does the Greek mean and all this, and kind of feeling this like, whoa, I'm getting the same thing now by reading and studying that I got with music early on, and that maybe I got in other ways. But so it definitely has been something in my mind that I've been conscious of trying to pursue, and conscious of, you're obviously aware when you're not at peace, but sometimes the not having peace, not being at peace, maybe living a life of anxiety or depression, or that becomes so commonplace that you kind of forget that actually the peace is that's our destination. That's our telos. Like the Bible is actually about peace. Like shalom is actually the point of God's creation. He rested in 7 days and, welcomed us into this peaceful world that then became unpeaceful. But in a lot of ways, if you're thinking about the story of Scripture and organizing it, you can really see it as kind of a dialectic between the things that take our peace and the God who's trying to restore our peace.
So there's a couple reasons I think that I experience you, and I think a lot of others who know you probably do too, as a person of peace. I find that one of the attractive things about knowing you as a friend. I think one of them is you and your wife, who's also a dear friend of mine, I would say go out of your way to try to live a life that isn't frantic. And you were doing that, I think, even before it was hip. It's like, probably most people listen to this don't know. I was your manager for your music career for a few years. And that instinct that many people in our generation have towards how can I add another thing to the list, another thing to the calendar, another thing to do. I've always known and experienced you as be someone who edges more the opposite way intuitively. Now that wasn't a life before you brought a beautiful little girl into the world.
Right.
But just lessons learned for us. We're trying to cultivate this virtue of peace in our lives. How does scheduling and just kind of the discipline around that help us with that kind of experience of God and knowing that, that calm and all that?
Yeah. I mean, practically speaking, Val and I always tried to, we called them pilgrimages, which we were trying to reconnect with each other, reconnect with God, and reconnect with ourselves. And it was an intentional time, just like anything. It was really just like it was a vacation, but with a little bit of extra intention, we hoped. And you have to schedule those things. Those things are not going to just fall into your lap. You're not going to wake up one week and think, hey, I got nothing going on this week. Great. I'm going to, go swimming. Or I'm going to, yeah, exactly. So you have to make those things happen. I recently heard a friend say, she was talking about you, I don't know where she got it, probably, I don't know, John Mark Cromer or somebody, whoever the guru of peace is right now in beautiful ways. Abandon annually, withdraw weekly, and something daily. It's that like weekly, daily, annual thing. And for me, the deepest, most open moments, because really peace is just the quality of being, like you said, at rest in what God is doing, but really the quality of being, the quality of attention. What is the quality of your attention when you're at peace versus when you're frantic? Those are very, very different states of attention. For me, the quality of attention before Winslow or Valerie wake up, although I've kind of got Valerie in the bandwagon now, so we both wake up very early. The quality of attention between, let's say 4 and 7 a.m. is very different than the quality of attention between 1 and 3 p.m. or 10 and 1 a.m. So for me, my day is going to be better if I'm getting up before my daughter wakes up for at least an hour or two. It's just like life is going to be better if I run every day. Life is going to be better if I don't overeat pizza when we eat pizza. It's like, this is just, my days are going to be better if and when I'm able to get up early. It kind of, I mean, you do this too, don't you? Look, you have early mornings, and there can be a quality to those. It's like the early morning can drift into the day in a way that's very miraculous.
I think that most people experience life like the day has a way of kind of mirroring a little bit how it starts.
Yeah.
And so I have we'll just give a huge caveat at this moment in the conversation to people who are like intuitively kind of night people. Mm-hmm. Love you and appreciate you, and the world is challenging for you. And my beautiful niece is like the all-time night owl.
Yeah.
And I think that I feel like God is constantly challenging me with the willingness to just, am I willing to do the amount of things there's actually time to do today? Or am I trying to jam that one extra thing or that two extra things into it, that when I do, I'm impatient in traffic, I'm impatient with the kids, I'm not willing to wait, and it just it puts all this storm around and inside, and it's like, for what?
Right.
For what? If the car doesn't get washed till tomorrow, if the check, it doesn't, but.
Exactly right.
I think that because, and I would love for you to speak to this a bit, because we kind of have achievement so high on our list, many of us, it makes it difficult to have peace. I know this about your music, which blesses me and I talk to people all the time that are in the orbit of my life who are so blessed by your music. And one of the decisions that you've made, we're not going to go down like a Nashville bashing rabbit trail here, But one of the decisions that you've made is to try to make the music that God wants you to make and that God
Right.
gifted you to make
Right.
at the expense of some amount of commercial appeal. And it
Yeah.
isn't like, and I know you well enough to know that it isn't this sort of like, I'm better than you because I'm artsy. That's all foolishness. It's you
Right.
being you. It's like
Right.
at the core of your and so I think there is something in that has to do with peace, because it's like doing what is really true to who God has made me to be, not like trying to kind of put on some other
Yeah.
glasses or coat. We've been through some of those seasons. Do you have any
Yeah.
observations about what the difference is in that might be
Yeah.
helpful to us?
For sure. I mean, you say achievement. I think it's even deeper than achievement. I think
Please.
I think it has to do with identity.
Yeah.
I think achievement is a one form of trying to get our identity from something else other than God. Which is hard. It's hard to actually actively get your identity from something that is deep and that is spiritual and that is true but kind of distant, right? I can, as a kid, as like a child of two Hispanic parents, I had an identity of being a Hispanic kid growing up in a majority white whatever world. That was an identity that wasn't, it just kind of, there was like a givenness to that in both positive and negative ways. And I think when we go to achievement or we go to these other, maybe it's whatever we reach for identity, beauty or family balance or whatever our family, like whatever the thing is, I have a lot of compassion for that identity piece, because it really is hard to settle into that givenness of like, I am loved, and I'm not only loved by God, but I was created with intention, and my idiosyncrasies and my personality and my capacity and my abilities are all created with a particular purpose and goal for the kingdom in mind. Like, that is a hard thing to settle, but the degree to which that settles, I think, is the degree to which we are not given to these, like, counterfeit ways of trying to buttress our identity. And it's never enough. The achievement thing is never enough. The beauty thing is going to fade, and that certainly is never enough. As regards to my music and work, it's like the degree to which I could settle into that, like, okay, God made me with certain sensibilities artistically, certain desires, ambitions artistically, that currently might not fit into certain categories commercially, but they certainly fit into the kingdom, and they certainly fit into the things that I'm most passionate about pastorally and spiritually, which is trying to create a space for people to attend to themselves and attend to God, and use music in a slightly different way. Now, I don't, I didn't really choose that. That just sort of came in the process of me growing and being and living and kind of realizing, oh, God, as an artist, God didn't make a mistake with me. There isn't like a less than with my gifting, because there's actually like a perfectly arranged set of factors, but it's perfectly arranged based on a backdrop that is different than certain commercial backdrops. And I think all of us have this. You as a pastor have this. Me as a dad, it's like we all have
yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, I think that a lot of us have been over time kind of caught in a expression of spirituality that is very active, which is good, but it's like, okay, I gotta get my Bible read, I gotta pray down my list, I gotta kind of task. And I think one of the things that I've learned from you, and I think one of the things I'm really working on, and I think helps us, there can be a more peaceful way to access God. And so just talk to those of us that aren't maybe the most intuitive with experiencing art or experiencing calm or experiencing silence on some ways that kind of utilizing music and a more peaceful maybe calm way of going at God and experiencing relationship with God that might be helpful to us who are a little more oriented towards task lists.
Yeah. No, and even, I don't feel like I'm a person who's totally oriented towards tasks necessarily either, but I do, it's still very difficult. So, my wife, who's a lot more task oriented,
Yeah.
finds it even doubly so. Something that I probably wouldn't have answered this way a few years ago, but I definitely am learning this not only from being a dad, but just from some recent experiences I've had. But there's actually something very, very spiritually rich about play. And by play, I don't mean, I think play can be frivolous, right? Like spending a whole week of your evenings playing video games or something. I'm not a person who finds that. I would actively argue against playing video games as play, for a lot of reasons. But by play, I simply mean the quality of almost being sort of unself-consciously joyful, and almost giving yourself to the practice of joy, and to it's like there's a settled peace at the root of it. When I see my daughter, who's 3, when she's at peak peace, it's very little. It's seldom. In fact, it's never like a Zen-like calm. It's usually this like frivolous enjoyment of her toys, of us as a family, of her in the water, of her on her scooter. There's like and I think we're afraid generally of play because, number one, it can be abused, and it actually can be like something that people use to avert responsibilities, to give into really negative things. But assuming all the other things, like, you haven't, you're generally trying to do these things, read your Bible.
It's very like Midwestern Protestant to like
Totally.
go at the assumption that like having a good time with nothing at the end of it is a waste.
Exactly.
It's very in our backgrounds for sure.
Exactly right. But, when I think of times we've hung out in our history, like when we were in college, some of the best times are just, it's sort of like at dinner and you sort of lose track of time.
Yeah.
And someone's telling that story for the 90th time and you want them to tell it again because it's amazing. There's something about that. It's like in relationship, in a little bit of kind of holy frivolity that there is. It kind of teaches you how to be, teaches you the peace of God. Because I don't think the peace of God is like, I think calm and silence are practices that get us to the peace of God, which is this joy-filled sense of rest and being,
What's really interesting about what I've been teaching about as we've been going through this study is this kind of Eastern almost idea that the way that you get at some of the things of God isn't by like pursuing them directly, but by pursuing the virtues, and then and that like peace, what I hear you saying is maybe isn't the way to get to a more peaceful existence. Isn't this kind of like, I'm just going to sit here,
right?
And I'm not going to think about anything, and I'm just going to breathe. And then all that tends to do for most people is just fill our minds with all of our anxieties. But like the long walk, the joyful conversation, the like great experience, of life. Like I remember, we're almost at the end now, but Kristen and I took some new friends from our church to your Christmas show in Evanston this past year. And it ended up, we had these friends. It was kind of like one of those things like I would do where they said yes to something and then they didn't even really know what it was. And they didn't know your music. And it was like Christmas and they were stressed and busy and they showed up. And like afterwards, this lovely woman was like basically in tears walking down the street, like of just like, I just like didn't think about one problem I had for an hour.
Oh, that's awesome.
And it's so funny because it's like, that's sort of like the peace thing, but it comes in this kind of opposite way. And I think that the way that you've just framed that, I think is really helpful to us because we're after the virtues that come from God as we walk with him, not like this sort of, I don't know, I'm just going to sit here and no matter how angry I am, I'm just going to be loving. Well, that's not
right.
Short-term game.
Totally.
John, just give us quick pitch now, because as this comes out, it's still kind of in that window of time. You have some new music out, and I would love for people to hear it. So just tell us, elevator pitch, and where's the best places to support you to see it.
Yeah, new record called Ordinary Ways. It's out everywhere on streaming platforms, on YouTube, and I'll be doing some shows. I tried something different with this record. I wanted to create a more immersive experience for people who wanted more of the record. So I'm not sure when this is coming out, but beginning of June, I'm going to be releasing kind of like a Ordinary Ways songwriting masterclass. And with that, I've made an Ordinary Ways devotional about every song. And I've made like a 2 or 3 hour quiet mix of the record to kind of assist in like prayer and journaling.
Oh, awesome.
And and basically just kind of letting people in on the process of like, I make this music kind of like you said, from a certain place, and it's aimed at a different direction, and here's why. Let me help you engage with it, and let me help you hopefully take one or two things away that can help you in your own either process of songwriting, creation, or journaling, or just praying, being a more prayerful person. So that's all coming out beginning of June, but the record's out now everywhere you listen to music.
Awesome. Thank you so much, buddy. We enjoyed it. I'm sure everyone listening was blessed, and thanks everybody for watching. This is Good News. We'll see you soon.